Hello and welcome to PropNext, the property podcast focused on issues that impact the future of the real estate industry. I'm your host, Gavin Morgan, and in addition to looking forward to today's and future conversations, if you'd like to know a little bit more about me, please look on www.propnext.com. That's www.propnext.com. Or if you'd like to chat privately, drop me a line on gavinrmorgan@propnext.com. That's GAVINRMORGAN at propnext.com on email. Gavin Phillips, it's absolutely fantastic to welcome you onto the show today.
No, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I'm going to ask you, Gavin, to introduce yourself in a second, but obviously to introduce you properly first. In your current role as regional vice president in the European business of IWG, and sitting in and around one of the most interesting spaces in real estate today, the flexible space. Gav, maybe just tell us a little bit more about your role, experience, background, please.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I've been very fortunate actually to have a global career. So worked in the UK, the Middle East, Australia, and covering Asia Pacific, and now in Amsterdam. And really always been very, very fascinated with real estate, but wanted to kind of get a kind of holistic grounding of all the different aspects. So worked in construction, consultancy, both on the occupier side, to the workplace, and the investor side. Now, obviously, very heavily into the operating business through flexible space, and also within previous roles, looking more at entrepreneurship, so developing concepts and taking those concepts right the way through to operation. So been, as I say, been lucky to kind of cover different aspects across different geographies and multiple different cultures, which has given me an interesting insight into what's happening, not just here in Europe, but all across the world right now.
Yeah, indeed. And flexible space, I mean, you and I have had so many conversations about this. It's a bit of a passion that we both share, just sort of not just looking at where it's going, but trying to play a little bit of a part in informing where it's going to take the real estate industry. How would you explain the industry today around flex?
Yeah, first, I mean, let's look at the evolution. So 30 years ago, Regis started in Belgium, much more of a business centre concept, frictionless experience. You kind of walk in, you can use it on demand, and typically for smaller organisations that wanted to access space and didn't want to have the capacity to go worry about how they built it, how they operated it, how they got it all set up. Then it went really heavily, or there was a kind of a new segment that came in, which is what I would call traditional co-working, where much more open spaces, much more membership focused actually. So more of a purpose-driven product, where you tended to have smaller companies or entrepreneurs in a space really trying to help each other grow and develop and build their businesses. And now, and I'm almost loath to use this word, but we're now almost in a hybrid of those two concepts, which seems to be the evolution in terms of the flexible space sector, where you've got slightly smaller business centres than, club spaces than those co-working products, and slightly less events and programming, but much more of a service, hospitality, experience level product. So your corporates can tap into it because they want to access and get closer to those the startup community, and also the flexibility of flexible space. But also the traditional people that use business centres and want to plug in and play can also access those spaces. And then we're also seeing an evolution, or a kind of a new segment come in, which are these what I would call club spaces. So you've got very purpose-driven, very lifestyle-oriented, very activation-focused, so events, programming, food, wellness, etc., where those concepts probably cater to a very niche market. So it could be that they cater to C-suites, it could be that they cater to women's clubs or health and well-being, but very kind of hyper purpose-driven, which is also coming into the market, but much more in a smaller way, let's say.
Yeah. I totally agree. And so just sort of twisting a bit to the future. I mean, Gavin, as you know, I mean, I think the future is very exciting in this space. I do think we're at a point through a big evolution in how commercial real estate is being used. I think the right marriage between traditional office space and dynamic flexibility or different types of flexibility not only makes buildings and partnerships between landlords and tenants a lot stickier in the future than they are today. But I also actually think structured the right way is it probably improves profitability for owners and gives occupiers a more dynamic environment for their employees at a better cost than they're paying today. But just on the, you mentioned the word purpose several times already in the conversation, and it's so important for employees. With many of the things that they're being driven by, in addition to profitability, just on the sustainability and the wellness side of things. Flexibility, how is that a better release, or how does flexibility better inform a future around wellness and sustainability that better suits the employees of organizations of the future?
Well, I think we're seeing a lot of macro trends, right, playing out right now. So you've got, why is flexible space growing at the way it is? Well, all the things around choice, flexibility, economic uncertainty. But I think when you start to look at health and sustainability, they're also part of those macro trends, right, which have only been accelerated by COVID. So what you're getting is individuals saying to corporates, we want to be part of an organisation that cares about our health and well-being. And I'm starting to even coin it in this word, but really look at it in this way, which is you should probably look at it as sustainable people, sustainable communities, and sustainable environment. And actually, that's the way I'm starting to kind of look at it and frame the conversations that we're having internally in our business, because I think that if you look at it that way, you create a much healthier picture, but a much clearer picture, which is, one, sustainability isn't different to health. It's just a different part of sustainability. But also, this is only going to get more and more important with, what's happening with the climate, what's happening with, the environment generally. But I also think what's happening with obesity and challenges around health for individuals. And as I say, there's a lot of data out there that points to the fact that users or individuals are more likely to choose an organisation that has, one, a clear purpose, and purpose-based organisations also perform better on the stock markets. So there's an economic driver, but also they want to be part of those organisations that are going to kind of be very conscious about their own health and well-being, but also the environment and the support that they give to the environment, and also that social responsibility, the way they're giving back to those local communities and positively impacting those local communities. So I think if you're a corporate or a landlord, if you're a landlord and you can help deliver some of those pieces to the corporates, it's really valuable for those corporates to be able to offer that to their, I call them their users, which I probably shouldn't, but their employees, of those spaces, because ultimately it has value and it'll help those organisations attract and retain the right talent. Yeah. But also from a landlord's perspective, it might, it's probably more likely to help them attract and retain the right customers, or users of their buildings.
And what excites me, Gavin, about the space is, for a long time in the industry, when I've looked at sustainability and flexibility and other things, like it or not, it's been difficult to encourage a lot of advancement because it's been hard to match profitability or better revenue or a more efficient operating platform with those goals. But we live in a world today where sustainability deployed in the right way, and I think flexibility and further development of the flexible dynamic in buildings actually does drive profitability for both owner and occupier, which is why I think there's going to be a lot of progress made. Horrible question, just off the back of that. What does office space look like in 10 years if things continue to develop down the type of track that we're talking about?
I think what's really exciting, right? Because if you look at where it could go, I mean, there's a lot of, ifs, buts and maybes around challenges with valuations and things like that. But I think it looks different based on asset class and location, firstly. So I think if you look at, kind of prime assets in good locations as an example, I think that if I look at the way landlords look at this and then I look at the way the operators could go, I think it's probably an interesting way to kind of look at both. I think there's definitely a way I think landlords become more operators, not in the way that they become flex operators necessarily, but I think they become more focused on customers, customer needs, customer preferences, evolution of their product. So they become, whether you want to say it's more like hotel operators, flex operators, etc., but they become much more customer centric. Where I think some landlords are going that direction already. I do want to make that point. It's absolutely not that nobody's going in that direction, but the evolution of their products and services based on data, insights, customer offerings is where I think that will go. So what does that look like in a product?
Yeah, I
think what it looks like is a much more service designed building. I think it probably looks like, healthy food, it's just the building to belong to the community or give back to the community in different ways. I think it looks like, when I talk about service design, it means just like when you walk through the front door to when you get to your elevators to your building, those touch points are really well thought out and they're operated on. So be that through technology, be that through human experiences, they're much more consciously organised. I think the landlords, to enable that to happen, if I look at the landlord side, may need to take positions or investments or joint ventures in, be that flex, be that food, be that sustainable, concepts or sustainable, organisations, because then they can have a level of influence over how that product changes and evolves continuously to support those customer needs. And I think they become more experiential locations. Yeah. Again, to put that in English, what does that actually mean? It probably means they're more, when people come together, they're more about creating, collaborating, connecting, and the building is designed to deliver that. So it might be more event spaces. It might be that they program events. It might even be that, again, if I look at the operator side, I can see operators owning food businesses, owning events businesses, owning subscriptions potentially of what their users are delivering. So if you look at the challenge that we've got with inflation at the minute, people are looking and involved and kind of analysing continuously. Do they have too many subscriptions? Because everybody, myself included, subscribed to this, that, and the other during lockdown. And actually now I'm going, do I really need my subscription to this or that or something else? Where I think the operators could actually end up owning subscriptions to lifestyle elements, which could be quite interesting. And again, if you plug that into a landlord partnership, you're then almost walking into something that feels very, very different to what it is today, because feels like it's been designed for the way you want to live and take some of those friction points out of your personal life versus just taking friction out of your work life, which I think is quite exciting.
Yeah. Gav, I totally agree. And I mean, you've heard me talk about ecosystems before. Like you and I have chatted about that lots too. And I think the building in 10 years, I mean, to put it in other terms, buildings will be dynamic ecosystems. And when you think about how a portfolio owner could create a dynamic ecosystem with multiple buildings and grade level and subgrade level space, I mean, it's incredibly exciting. Of course, individual building owners can do that too by leveraging what's around the buildings. But what's interesting
one interesting point, just before we move on that, because I think that's a really interesting point, is that if you're a portfolio landlord and you also have much more rigor around your understanding of your customers, where their users live, work, and play, and all those kind of interesting points, is you could even not just operate flex in your building. You could have a flex site in one of those locations where, let's say, all of your 70% of the employees that work for the companies in your building tend to live in a certain demographic. Well, maybe you even take a position in a flexible operation or have a really close tie-up with a flexible operation in those locations, because then you can start to offer hub and spoke a land, with in partnership with those operators in a way that, you're, as I say, you start to make it more difficult, and I mean this in the most positive way, but more difficult for people to leave your building, because you're solving problems partly they didn't even know they had historically, and therefore you're creating opportunities to create much stronger partnerships rather than just the kind of tenant-landlord relationship that it was historically.
Yeah, and I think, Gav, we could see not only leases potentially abolished, I think we could move in the future to something that looks more like sort of partnership-oriented management agreements. If you think about a portfolio operated as an ecosystem, using data to properly determine users' needs, I mean, the efficiency that would drive, the amount of waste that it would reduce, that lends toward a much more sustainable environment for owners and users. Never mind, the additional dynamic you get, the better profitability from the landlord and tenant. I mean, it just feels like such a logical direction. And I mean, I've talked about sort of tiered membership systems in environments like that before, where occupiers in future buy, whether it's a diamond, a platinum, a gold, or a bronze, and get to use, better or different elements for different spaces of time for those qualities, or, for those tiers of ownership.
Well, that goes back to loyalty, right? So that goes back to, if you look at, for example, the best example I've seen of this anywhere in the world is the Qantas loyalty program. Now, I'm not saying this is the best loyalty program in the world, but actually, I think I read something 2 or 3 years ago where a third of credit card spend in Australia could be traced back to Qantas loyalty program. So, I mean, actually, if you look at this from again, if you are a portfolio landlord, and I think you can do it in different ways if you're smaller landlords, and I'm being very, future focused or theoretical here rather than the reality of certain things at the minute. But I could see a world where if you're much more customer centric, you understand, how to do that. If you're a big portfolio landlord, maybe or an operator, maybe you own the experience of 500,000 people every day. Well, that's quite exciting. If you look at a data-driven world, you can create some quite powerful, interesting partnerships, alliances, relationships to create one, great customer service, great customer experiences, great operations locally, but also, again, design those subscriptions, those lifestyle elements that if you are spending money in that building, get rewarded for those things. I was having a cracking conversation with a food operator the other day. They got a way where if you spend money in their cafes, you get rewarded, through their wellness partners. We were talking I had a conversation with someone the other day that was, in both, food and also looking at wellness, and they were rewarding people for going to the gym, giving them discounts in the food outlets, and actually. Again, I think if you're a large-scale landlord or you're a large-scale operator, you've got so many opportunities because you own the experience of significant portions of people every day. Now, you don't need to be a large-scale, investor, landlord, operator to do some of these things, but you have different opportunities to win through relationships and alliances locally. If you're not those people.
Yeah. So, Gavin, rounding up with that, thank you. As I said earlier in the podcast, I find this such an interesting space, and I do think that flexibility and the faster deployment of technology into real estate are really going to take property ecosystems into a place in the near future that we could never have envisaged, particularly in an industry that has been such a slow adopter of technology and that has moved relatively slowly over the past several decades, up to a point I would say about 2 or 3 years ago where we've really started to see things change quite quickly. My bet is that over the next 5 years, we're going to see the challenge that we've talked about to traditional leases. We'll see owners looking at membership models that offer a much more dynamic environment to occupiers within the envelope of either a building or within the ecosystem that's offered by real estate portfolios, particularly those that are clustered closely together. For sure, it's one of the most interesting spaces to watch in the industry, and I'm looking forward to staying in touch with you as well as keeping an eye on what happens and seeing if it develops as we think moving forward. Thanks again for taking the time to join us. It's been terrific talking to you on this topic, and we'll hopefully have you back again on the show soon. Thank you. Have a good day. So that's a wrap for today's podcast, and it just leaves it for me to thank you very much for tuning in and listening to our conversation. And as I mentioned at the beginning, if you'd like any information or you want to have a chat, drop me a line on Gavin R. Morgan at propnext.com, GavinRMorgan at propnext.com. Or there's more information, as I said earlier, too, on www.propnext.com. That's www.propnx.com. I look forward to speaking with you in future podcasts, and thank you again.